Massa's bid to win the 2008 title has failed. Adrian reveals Aston's progress for 2026. Bottas and Perez begin tests for Cadillac, and all the latest F1 news. Picture this. A championship decided by a single point 17 years ago is now being challenged in a London courtroom for $82 million. Felipe Massa wants Lewis Hamilton's first world title stripped away, and the Formula One world is watching this legal bombshell explode. What if I told you that one of the most controversial races in motorsport history might have cost a driver his only shot at becoming world champion? And what if the people in charge knew about the cheating but chose to cover it up to protect the sport's reputation? This isn't just another racing controversy. This is about justice, manipulation, and whether the truth can rewrite history books that have been closed for nearly 2 decades. In 2008, Felipe Massa came within 1 championship point of achieving his Formula One dream. The Brazilian Ferrari driver had battled Lewis Hamilton all season long, with their title fight going down to the very last race in Brazil. Hamilton crossed the line 5th, securing just enough points to claim his maiden world championship by the narrowest of margins. But according to Massa, that championship was stolen from him through one of the most shocking scandals Formula One has ever witnessed. The Singapore Grand Prix that year wasn't just another race. It was the scene of deliberate sabotage that would later be known as Crashgate. During that night race in Singapore, Nelson Piquet Jr. deliberately crashed his Renault car to help his teammate Fernando Alonso win the race. The crash brought out the safety car at the perfect moment for Alonso, who had pitted early and was running in an impossible position. Meanwhile, Massa's race was completely ruined. The Brazilian was leading the championship at that point and looked set for a strong finish when the safety car changed everything. During the chaos that followed, Ferrari made a catastrophic pit stop error. Massa drove away from his pit box with the fuel hose still attached, dragging it along and knocking over a crew member. This forced him to make an additional stop and rejoin the race at the back of the field. He finished 13th, scoring 0 points from what should have been a race-winning position. Those lost points proved crucial in Hamilton ultimately winning the championship by just 1 point at the season's end. Here's where the story gets explosive. Piquet Jr. only admitted to the deliberate crash a full year later in 2009 after being dropped by Renault. The confession revealed that team principal Flavio Briatore and technical director Pat Simons had orchestrated the entire scheme. But Massa's legal team claims the governing bodies knew about this manipulation much earlier and chose to hide it. The trigger for this lawsuit came from shocking comments made by former Formula One Supremo Bernie Ecclestone in a 2023 interview. Ecclestone revealed that he and the late FIA president Max Mosley had known the crash was deliberate, but decided not to investigate or act on it. Their reasoning? To protect Formula One from a massive scandal that could have destroyed the sport's credibility. This admission sparked outrage from Massa, who realized he might have been cheated out of his rightful championship. If the Singapore Grand Prix results had been annulled due to the proven manipulation, Hamilton's points total would have dropped below Massa's, making the Brazilian the 2008 world champion. The courtroom drama unfolding in London's High Court is absolutely fascinating. Massa's legal representatives argue that Formula One's governing bodies breached their duties by failing to investigate known race manipulation. They claim Massa only discovered grounds for legal action in 2023 following Ecclestone's explosive interview. The defense is fighting back hard, calling Massa's case a misguided attempt to reopen old wounds. They argue the Brazilian had plenty of opportunities to challenge the results in 2008 or 2009 when the scandal first emerged. More importantly, they claim it would be fundamentally unfair to strip Hamilton of his first championship when the British driver was equally affected by the crash and had no involvement in the conspiracy. Bernie Ecclestone, now 95 years old, is claiming through his lawyers that he doesn't even remember giving the interview that sparked this legal battle. The former Formula One boss is represented by David Quest, who argued that Massa performed very poorly in Singapore, regardless of the manipulation. The FIA's legal team is equally dismissive, with John Merzad describing Massa's claim as both torturous and overly ambitious. They argue that Massa's own racing errors, particularly that disastrous pit stop, cost him far more than any external manipulation. Formula One management's lawyers are taking perhaps the harshest stance, with Annalise Day stating bluntly that Massa's case will fail. They argue that Hamilton simply outperformed Massa throughout both the Singapore race and the entire 2008 season, regardless of any external factors. What makes this case particularly complex is the timing. Legal experts are questioning whether Massa can successfully argue he only became aware of grounds for action in 2023, given that the Crashgate scandal was thoroughly investigated and publicized back in 2009. There's also the fundamental question of sporting justice versus legal technicalities. Even if the courts find that race manipulation occurred and was covered up, can they realistically overturn a championship result from 17 years ago? The precedent this could set for questioning historical sporting results is staggering. Massa himself has been clear about his motivations, emphasizing that his fight isn't personal against Hamilton. He respects the British driver's achievements and acknowledges him as one of Formula One's greatest champions. Instead, Massa frames this as a battle for sporting integrity and justice. The Brazilian driver's emotional testimony reveals the personal cost of this controversy. He describes the moment his son learned about the potential cover-up and asked why his father wasn't fighting for justice. For Massa, this isn't about money or revenge. It's about being recognized as the rightful 2008 world champion. The hearing is expected to conclude this Friday, with a ruling to follow at a later date. Legal experts are skeptical about Massa's chances, pointing to the significant hurdles he faces regarding timing, causation, and the practical impossibility of unwinding championship results from nearly 2 decades ago. This case represents far more than one driver's quest for belated recognition. It raises fundamental questions about sporting integrity, the statute of limitations on justice, and whether governing bodies can prioritize institutional protection over individual rights. Regardless of the court's decision, this legal battle has already reopened one of Formula One's most controversial chapters and forced the sport to confront uncomfortable questions about transparency and accountability that echo through today's racing world. What if I told you that one of Formula One's brightest young stars just hit his first major career roadblock at the worst possible time? Oscar Piastri, the Australian driver who seemed untouchable for 6 months straight, suddenly finds himself in a psychological battle that could cost him his first world championship. And according to a Formula One legend, the problem isn't his car or his talent, it's all in his head. Just weeks ago, Piastri was sitting pretty at the top of the drivers' standings, looking like the next inevitable world champion. Fast forward to today, and he's trailing his own teammate by a single point with only 4 races left in the season. What happened? How does a driver go from championship leader to struggling to keep up with his McLaren colleague Lando Norris? The answer might surprise you, and it reveals something crucial about the mental game at the highest level of motorsport. Let's rewind to understand how we got here. For over half a year, Piastri dominated the championship fight. He was calm, calculated, and consistently fast. While other drivers crumbled under pressure, the young Australian seemed to thrive in the spotlight. His racecraft was mature beyond his years, and many experts predicted he would cruise to his first title. The McLaren was clearly the fastest car on the grid, and Piastri was extracting every ounce of performance from it. But then something shifted during the recent races in the United States and Mexico. Suddenly, the same driver who had been setting the pace all season long was struggling to match his teammates' speed. In Mexico City, Piastri qualified a disappointing 7th, while Norris claimed pole position. During the race, despite a spectacular overtake on George Russell at turn 1 and a solid 5th-place finish, it wasn't enough to maintain his championship lead. The numbers tell the story. While Norris dominated the Mexican Grand Prix with a commanding victory, Piastri could only salvage 5th place. That result swing was enough to flip the championship standings for the first time since Saudi Arabia. Now, instead of controlling his own destiny, Piastri finds himself chasing his teammates' points tally. Here's where it gets interesting. Jacques Villeneuve, The 1,997 world champion who knows something about title pressure has identified what he believes is the root cause of Piastri's sudden struggles. It's not a mechanical issue with the car or a lack of raw speed. According to Villeneuve, Piastri's biggest enemy right now is himself. The Canadian legend observed that Piastri appears to be driving with tension and stress, which is completely changing his natural driving style. When a driver starts second-guessing themselves and tightens up behind the wheel, it creates a cascade of problems. The smooth, flowing driving style that made Piastri so effective earlier in the season has been replaced by jerky, uncomfortable movements that prevent him from finding the optimal balance in his car. This psychological shift explains why Piastri admitted that the recent weekends have required a completely different approach to driving compared to most of the season. When you're comfortable and confident, you can push the car to its absolute limits while maintaining that crucial smooth touch. But when doubt creeps in and you start overthinking every corner entry and braking point, the lap times inevitably suffer. The irony is that Norris, who struggled with consistency issues earlier in the year, has found his groove at precisely the moment when the championship is most critical. While Piastri has been working with his engineers to understand why the car feels different, Norris has been steadily building confidence and extracting more performance from the same machinery. Villeneuve's analysis cuts to the heart of what separates good drivers from great champions. He pointed out that you can't simply copy another driver's car setup and expect it to work. Every driver has their own unique style and preferences. What works perfectly for Norris might feel completely alien to Piastri, even though they're driving identical cars. The veteran champion emphasized that Piastri needs to rediscover his natural rhythm and return to the calm, composed driving style that brought him success earlier in the season. This means blocking out the external pressure, ignoring the championship mathematics, and focusing purely on driving the car the way he knows best. What makes this situation so compelling is that we're witnessing a real-time masterclass in sports psychology. Piastri isn't slower because he's forgotten how to drive or because his car has suddenly become uncompetitive. He's slower because the mental pressure of a championship fight has subtly altered his approach, and those small changes are having massive consequences on track. The good news for Piastri is that Villeneuve believes he's still very much in the fight. Being just 1 point behind, with 4 races remaining, means that a single strong weekend could completely change the championship picture again. But time is running out, and every race weekend now carries enormous weight. The question becomes whether Piastri can rediscover his mental equilibrium quickly enough to mount a comeback. Can he silence the inner voice telling him that his championship dreams are slipping away? Can he return to the smooth, instinctive driving that made him so formidable earlier this year? With Brazil coming up next, followed by 3 more crucial rounds, we're about to find out if this young champion has the mental fortitude to handle pressure when it matters most. This championship battle has become as much about psychology as it is about pure speed, and that makes it absolutely fascinating to watch unfold. What if the most successful car designer in Formula One history just dropped a bombshell about his new team that could change everything we thought we knew about the 2026 season? Adrian Newey, the mastermind behind Red Bull's dominance, has been speaking candidly about his move to Aston Martin, and his latest comments are sending shockwaves through the paddock. The man who helped deliver 26 world championship titles across his legendary career has revealed something that should have every Formula One fan paying attention. Newey is experiencing what he calls a sense of déjà vu at Aston Martin, and when you understand what that means, it becomes clear why this could be the most significant development in modern Formula One. Let me take you back to 2006, when Adrian Newey first walked through the doors at Red Bull Racing. What he found was a team that had forgotten how to believe in itself. The organization was built from the remnants of Jaguar Racing, a squad that had spent years under Ford management without achieving any meaningful success. The people working there had mentally accepted mediocrity as their ceiling. Newey discovered that when a team stops believing they can win races, a toxic culture begins to take root. Complacency creeps in like a virus. Laziness becomes the norm. Self-doubt replaces ambition. And perhaps most dangerously, a blame culture starts to poison the entire operation from within. Fast forward to today, and Newey is making a startling admission about his current situation at Aston Martin. In his own words, "There is a bit of déjà vu happening right now." For those who understand the significance of this statement, it represents both a massive challenge and an incredible opportunity. Think about what Newey accomplished at Red Bull after identifying these cultural problems. He transformed a midfield team into a championship-winning powerhouse that went on to dominate Formula One for multiple seasons. The parallels with Aston Martin are impossible to ignore. Aston Martin has been primarily a midfield competitor throughout their Formula One existence. Despite a promising 2023 campaign that delivered 8 podium finishes, the team has struggled to establish itself as a consistent frontrunner. They have invested heavily in infrastructure, building a state-of-the-art factory and wind tunnel facility, all with championship ambitions in mind. But here's where things get really interesting. The timing of Newey's arrival at Aston Martin coincides perfectly with one of the most significant regulation changes in Formula One history. The 2026 season will introduce sweeping modifications to both chassis and engine regulations, creating what Newey describes as a complete reset for every team on the grid. This regulatory shakeup presents a unique opportunity that rarely occurs in Formula One. While the established order typically remains intact, major regulation changes can sometimes disrupt the hierarchy in dramatic ways. Newey himself points to 2009 as a perfect example, when Ferrari and McLaren, the dominant forces of 2008, suddenly found themselves struggling while Braun GP and Red Bull emerged as the new powers. The question becomes whether Aston Martin can capitalize on this moment of reset while simultaneously addressing the cultural issues that Newey has identified. His role as managing technical partner and team shareholder gives him unprecedented influence to drive the changes necessary for success. Newey's approach to Formula One car design has always been refreshingly analog in an increasingly digital world. While other designers rely heavily on computer simulations and complex mathematical models, he still prefers his trusty notebook and pen and paper approach. This old-school methodology has proven remarkably effective throughout his career. However, Newey has identified a concerning trend across modern Formula One teams. As organizations have grown larger and more dependent on simulation technology, people have stopped questioning the data they receive. Teams are becoming dangerously complacent about accepting computer-generated results without applying critical thinking or drawing from experience to identify potential errors. This over-reliance on technology represents exactly the kind of complacency that can undermine a team's performance. Newey emphasizes that successful Formula One operations require seamless integration between 3 core departments: aerodynamics, mechanical design, and vehicle dynamics. When these departments fail to work together effectively, or when they blindly trust flawed data, the entire project suffers. The challenge facing Aston Martin extends beyond technical considerations. Formula One success requires a holistic approach that addresses both the engineering and cultural aspects of competition. The most aerodynamically efficient car in the world becomes worthless if the structural integrity cannot handle the loads, or if the vehicle dynamics modeling contains fundamental errors. Newey's experience at Red Bull proves that cultural transformation is possible, but it requires sustained effort and strong leadership. The fact that he has become a shareholder at Aston Martin demonstrates his long-term commitment to the project. This financial stake ensures that his interests are completely aligned with the team's success. The 2026 regulation changes create an environment where established hierarchies could be challenged. Teams that execute the transition most effectively while maintaining strong internal cultures will have the best opportunity to emerge as championship contenders. Aston Martin's significant infrastructure investments position them well from a technical standpoint, but addressing the cultural challenges will be equally important. Adrian Newey's track record speaks for itself. When he identifies problems within a team and commits to solving them, the results tend to be spectacular. His ability to recognize the déjà vu situation at Aston Martin early in the process suggests that he understands exactly what needs to change. The Formula One landscape could look dramatically different by 2026, and Adrian Newey's candid assessment of Aston Martin's current state might just be the first hint of what's coming. If history is any guide, betting against Adrian Newey's ability to transform a team's fortunes would be a mistake. Did Lewis Hamilton just get robbed by the FIA, or was his Mexican Grand Prix penalty completely justified? This controversial decision has split the Formula One community right down the middle, and what happened next will shock you. Picture this. You're battling wheel-to-wheel with Max Verstappen at 200 miles per hour, fighting for every inch of track position. One moment of defensive driving goes wrong. You cut across the grass, and suddenly, you're hit with a 10-second penalty that destroys your entire race. That's exactly what happened to Lewis Hamilton in Mexico, and his response was absolutely explosive. After receiving what he called a prime example of double standards from the governing body, Hamilton didn't hold back. He told reporters he felt completely let down by the FIA's decision-making process. But here's where things get really interesting. Veteran commentator Martin Brundle stepped into the debate with a verdict that's causing massive controversy across social media. Let me break down exactly what happened during those crucial moments that changed everything. On lap 6, Hamilton and Verstappen were locked in an intense battle that had fans on the edge of their seats. Verstappen made an aggressive dive down the inside at turn 1, forcing both drivers to go side by side through the chicane. The Dutch driver ended up cutting across the grass himself, rejoining the track ahead of Hamilton. But the drama was just getting started. When they reached turn 4, Hamilton attempted a comeback move on the outside line. This is where everything went sideways. Hamilton locked up his front right tire and found himself sliding across the grass. When he rejoined the asphalt, he was positioned ahead of Verstappen with a significant advantage. The stewards immediately took notice of Hamilton's shortcut. Unlike Verstappen's earlier grass excursion, Hamilton's move gained him a clear positional advantage that he maintained for the rest of that sequence. The penalty decision came swift and harsh, a full 10-second time penalty that would prove race-defining. Martin Brundle's analysis of the incident has become the most talked-about commentary of the weekend. The respected former driver and current Sky Sports analyst made it crystal clear that he believed the stewards got both decisions absolutely right. His reasoning reveals just how complex these split-second judgment calls really are. According to Brundle's detailed breakdown, Verstappen had legitimately claimed the corner during their initial battle. The key factor was positioning at the apex. Verstappen was slightly ahead of Hamilton's front axle, which gave him ownership of the corner under racing regulations. This entitled him to take the normal racing line, making his grass excursion a consequence of the battle rather than an advantage-gaining move. The Hamilton incident was completely different in Brundle's eyes. When Hamilton locked up and cut across the grass at turn 4, he emerged with roughly a 100-meter advantage over the entire pack behind him. Most critically, Hamilton made no attempt to slow down and surrender the advantage he'd gained through his shortcut. This is where Brundle's commentary gets really spicy. He openly questioned why drivers even bothered taking turns 4 and 5, suggesting that cutting across the grass looked like a much faster route. His sarcastic observation highlighted just how significant Hamilton's advantage really was. The former racing driver emphasized that Hamilton could have followed the proper procedure by slowing down and giving back either the position or the distance advantage. Instead, Hamilton maintained his ill-gotten gains throughout the remainder of that sequence, which under current regulations demands the harshest available penalty. Jacques Villeneuve, the 1997 world champion, immediately backed up Brundle's assessment with equally strong language. Villeneuve called the penalty completely deserved, pointing out that Hamilton's massive lead over the pack was the real problem. The Canadian emphasized that Hamilton didn't even attempt to correct his advantage, which made the steward's decision straightforward. But here's what makes this controversy so fascinating: the wider implications for championship consistency. Hamilton's frustration stems from what he perceives as inconsistent application of penalties throughout the season. Driver after driver has complained about the unpredictable nature of steward decisions, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty that's affecting racing strategies. The timing couldn't be worse. for Hamilton's championship hopes. With Lando Norris now leading the drivers' standings, and Max Verstappen just 36 points behind, with 4 races remaining, every single point matters enormously. Hamilton's 8th-place finish, compromised by the penalty, represents a significant blow to his mathematical chances of challenging for the title. What's really dividing opinion is the question of racing intent versus technical rule-breaking. Hamilton's supporters argue that he was simply trying to avoid a collision and that penalizing defensive driving discourages wheel-to-wheel combat. Critics counter that maintaining advantages gained through track limits, violations undermines the fundamental fairness of competition. The controversy reveals deeper issues within Formula One's governance structure. When experienced commentators like Brundle acknowledge that others will disagree with their analysis, it highlights just how subjective these crucial decisions can become. The sport desperately needs clearer, more consistent guidelines that drivers and fans can understand. As we head toward the final races of this incredible championship battle, the Hamilton penalty controversy serves as a perfect example of how split-second decisions can define entire careers. Whether you believe the FIA got it right or completely wrong, one thing's certain: this debate will continue raging long after the checkered flag falls on the season finale. When a Formula One driver steps into their cockpit, they're not just battling other racers on track. Sometimes they're fighting an entire nation's emotions. And nowhere is this more intense than at the Mexican Grand Prix, where passion runs deeper than the high-altitude air of Mexico City. Picture this. You're Liam Lawson, a young New Zealand driver trying to make your mark in the most competitive motorsport on Earth. You've just replaced one of Mexico's most beloved heroes, Sergio Perez, at Red Bull Racing. Now you're back at the very circuit where Mexican fans worship their local champion, and instead of cheers, you're hearing something much darker echoing through the grandstands. The Mexican Grand Prix weekend revealed a fascinating psychological battle that went far beyond lap times and championship points. While the motorsport world focused on Lando Norris claiming his 6th victory of the season and reclaiming the driver's championship lead, a more personal drama was unfolding in the stands and on social media. Fan footage has surfaced showing Lawson receiving a hostile reception from spectators as his Racing Bulls car navigated through the challenging Turn 4-5-6 complex at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. The jeering wasn't just random crowd noise. It was a calculated emotional response from fans who felt betrayed by the replacement of their hero. This isn't just about booing a driver. This is about national identity, sporting loyalty, and the complex relationship between fans and the athletes they choose to either worship or vilify. Sergio Perez wasn't just any driver to Mexican fans. He was their representative on the global stage, their proof that Mexican talent could compete with the world's best. When Lawson took that seat, he inherited something more complex than a racing contract. The irony becomes even more striking when you consider Lawson's tumultuous journey to this moment. He initially replaced Perez for the 2025 season, but struggled as Max Verstappen's teammate during the opening rounds in Australia and China. After just 2 races, he found himself demoted back to Racing Bulls, with Yuki Tsunoda stepping up to fill the Red Bull seat from the Japanese Grand Prix onward. But the Mexican crowd's memory runs long and deep. During the 2024 Mexican Grand Prix, Lawson had engaged in an intense battle with Perez that became legendary for all the wrong reasons. The confrontation escalated to the point where Lawson was caught on camera making an obscene gesture toward the Mexican driver. That moment crystallized in the minds of local fans as the ultimate disrespect to their champion. The weekend became even more dramatic for Lawson when his race ended abruptly after just 5 laps due to damage sustained in a first-corner collision with Carlos Sainz. The incident left Lawson's car significantly compromised, with floor damage that cost him approximately 3 seconds per lap, essentially ending any chance of a grap day. Competitive result. What happened next added another layer to this already complex narrative. After pitting, Lawson encountered track marshals who had been deployed to clear debris from Turn 1. His radio transmission revealed the genuine terror in his voice as he realized how close he'd come to a catastrophic accident. His words, captured for posterity, showed a driver who understood he'd nearly been involved in something far more serious than a racing incident. Lawson's frustration with Sainz was palpable in post-race interviews. He accused the Spanish driver of lacking awareness during the chaotic first corner melee, suggesting that Sainz had cut the chicane without properly checking his surroundings. The collision destroyed Lawson's front wing and significantly damaged his floor, effectively ruining any chance of points. This incident highlighted one of Formula One's most challenging aspects: the split-second decisions that can determine not just race results, but entire career trajectories. For a driver like Lawson, already under intense scrutiny following his brief and unsuccessful stint at Red Bull, every race weekend carries enormous pressure to prove his worth. The booing incident also revealed something deeper about modern Formula One fandom. In an era of global media coverage and social media amplification, driver rivalries extend far beyond the track. Fans invest emotionally in their heroes and can transfer that passion into hostility toward those they perceive as threats or disrespectful challengers. Interestingly, Lawson wasn't the only driver to face crowd hostility during the Mexican Grand Prix weekend. Lando Norris also experienced significant booing during both the drivers' parade and post-race celebrations, though for different reasons related to McLaren's controversial team orders decisions earlier in the season. The contrast between these two booing incidents tells us something important about fan psychology. Norris faced criticism for strategic decisions that affected championship standings, while Lawson faced personal animosity for replacing a beloved local hero and showing disrespect during their previous encounter. As Formula One continues to expand its global reach, these cultural tensions will likely become more common. Drivers must navigate not just the technical challenges of their sport, but also the emotional landscapes of different fan bases around the world. For Lawson, the Mexican Grand Prix served as a harsh reminder that in Formula One, your reputation follows you everywhere. Every gesture, every battle, every moment of triumph or failure becomes part of a narrative that fans will remember long after the checkered flag falls. The question now is whether Lawson can transform this hostility into motivation, using the crowd's energy as fuel to prove his critics wrong and earn respect through performance rather than controversy.